Lao Tzu says, to know by not knowing is best. To not know by knowing is disease. I bring that up right here at the outset to point out that the process in which we find ourselves engaged, which is the transmission of this information, is part and parcel of healthcare. To jump right to a practical level, in the way that we seek to educate ourselves about these things, in a similar, though obviously differently emphasized way, patients need to learn and understand the material so that we have, aside from with each other, with patients, a generally resonant understanding of what the heck is going on. So, does that make sense? So we might as well just tackle the difficult subject first, which is, what is knowledge? The presumption is, through this activity, something will take place between us so that this fairly abstract quantity, knowledge, which is, I suppose, presumed to be in my possession, magically comes into your possession. So what is that knowledge thing? The reason I gave you that quote from Lao Tzu is welcome. I want to underscore this value in establishing the rules by which our cooperation takes place. And that is the preeminent importance of not knowing. Lao Tzu says it's the best way. So why not use it? He further points out that when knowledge inhibits or prohibits knowing, this is disease. This is what disease is. Now, these ideas may or may not ring your bell. They may or may not harmonize with other experiences that you've had seeking and gaining and using knowledge, but they are particularly important when the knowledge under examination is knowledge related to yin and yang. Because the yin-yang theory one is embracive of so much of the material with which we deal in Chinese medicine. And has its own logic, its own value on the subject, for instance, of what is knowledge. Many years ago, Elizabeth Rocha came here for the first time, and one of the things we did was have an evening on Lao Tzu. And she pointed out that in our Western European, modern American traditions of knowledge, the basic functional unit of the dynamics of knowledge, creation and transmission is the fact. One accumulates masses of facts. One, in teaching, transmits these facts so that one student comes into their possession. In contrast to this, in the way of knowledge that's more closely associated with yin-yang theory, the functional unit is movement, is the dynamism of change. What's the ultimate fact in the so-called Western tradition? God. God is the fact beyond which no fact can exist. The ultimate fact. What's the ultimate fact in the Taiji epistemics? Change. Everything always changes. The most fundamental observation of the natural world, which forms the absolute basis of Taiji, yin-yang, is change. You cannot observe any phenomena without noticing that it's change. There is no sameness. Everything is itself. This is important to our enterprise. Because lo and behold, what we seek to convey and what we seek to cultivate and what we seek to refine is a way of using the mind. And this way of using the mind is different than the way of being a student in a Western academic setting. This is one of the things which is so difficult about modern education in Chinese medicine. It has yielded its mental method completely to the Western academic model. And you know why you sit the way you sit, why you hold your head the way you hold it, why you cross your legs the way you do, why you hold your hands.
Habit.
Habit. Habit means where you live, where you habitate. You're good at what you do every day. We're expert in being ourselves. Every morning we wake up and instantly we're ourselves. Maybe a few people take a little time to rub the sleep out of their eyes, but before you know it, everything that's important is important yet again. You know, it would be considered pathology of a extreme nature to regain consciousness without these habits of identity, possession, will. Well, does it have to be this way? Probably open to debate how much of this kind of phenomena is the expression of, for lack of a better word, we'll say genetics, and how much of it is culturally determined. Yet it goes without saying that to understand the way the mind is employed in the creation of knowledge is absolutely necessary to understand the contents of that knowledge in the reception of that knowledge. And if you don't pay some attention to this, there's no other word, it's epistemology, it's the philosophy of knowledge. What is it? If you don't take it into account, if you don't get it on within your framework of understanding, you are at least liable to make major misses in your understanding of the contents of theories such as yin-yang, Taiji, qi, wuxing. What are these things? To understand them, you must understand the framework of epistemic dynamics. How do they work? Fortunately, we have the manual. That's what Lao Tzu is. If you're not as I am, a serial reader of Lao Tzu, become one. It should be a text that you're always in. I don't mean every moment of every day, but I mean it's one of those texts which well, I knew a psychiatrist many years ago who said that every 5 years he read James Joyce's Finnegan's Wake because he found it the most useful way to understand what progress he'd made in life. It was just a text he used. Well, Lao Tzu is full of extraordinarily useful insights into what were the epistemic dynamics of those who created such ideas as Taiji, yin-yang, qi, Tao, wuxing, and the various other theories that that form more or less the skeleton of our work in the clinic. So when this discussion started with the question of what were we going to talk about today? And the realization that we've got a syllabus. And my statement that there will always come to exist tension between us, the people who are engaged in the course, and the syllabus, because our needs are real and alive, and I would say take precedence over what's written in the syllabus. In other words, the syllabus is an outline that was meant to gather a bunch of material into text form so that it could be conveyed not in this format. The purpose of doing that is to free up this format time for more deeper delving into things. Anyway, that's what all this material in under day one is doing there. Any questions about that? I want to talk about another concept.
Just to reiterate, it sounds like knowing the context in which the skeleton of Chinese medicine comes about is important to the transmission of that knowledge.
Well, I would say that if you measure backwards from today, you reach well beyond 2,000 years of a fairly well-documented and contiguous transmission of information. All of it except for less than the last century has been done in an environment where such an appreciation for that framework of knowledge was part of the fabric of life. In modern times, we're attempting an experiment. Can one transmit this topic without it? And to me, that's the only rational way of considering the modern version of Chinese medical education. Does that make sense?
So it's an experiment whether the modern context can absorb this?
I'd say the experiment is if you educate people in the subject without this, what do you end up with? Regardless of what it's being called, what is it? You know, there's a reality that can only be shined up and polished to a certain extent. What is the actual product of an education which You know, I've been beating this drum for 20 years. It's only in the last few that there's been any real resonance in the field of let's just say, like-minded people who understand that, yes, it's not arbitrary and it's not fiendishly bizarre to believe that. It's normal. It's normal that when you study the language or the scientific knowledge of a different community than the one you're in, you study the whole of that community in terms of what are its values, what are its methods of thinking, what are its methods of exchanging information, how does the whole process take place. Only in Chinese medicine, in the modern American and many other non-Chinese settings, it's often omitted. So we won't do that. So we hear now and then about medicine as intention. And intention is an important topic to sort of touch in this context of knowledge, because intention in Chinese is, the Chinese term is yi, and the character, I don't have a character, I hope it's in the printed book. The character E is made up of tone or note. The character for tone or note in above the heart. And it's basically interpreted as the manifestation of the heart's activity. The mind is often used, English cognate for E, but more to the point is the product of the mind, the stuff contained in the mind, consciousness, and often specifically intention. So what is the relationship between medicine and intention? I'm not in possession of the answer to that question. But I think it's an important question that needs to be plucked up into like the fronts of our minds. The broader question is, do your thoughts matter? And do your thoughts matter as a clinician? Meaning what? Can you think thoughts that render your treatment more or less effective? Is there a range of efficacy that's under the influence of your consciousness? And if so, how does that work? Now, maybe some people think it's presumptuous or stupid or rude of me to ask such a question. But, you know, I believe that that question needs to be kept on your mind throughout your workday in the clinic. Now, let me tread a little water here. When we talk about the mind, it's always a good idea to point out that the mind has not yet been defined in the English language. There's no one in the room, there's no one in the state, there's no one in the country, and there's no one on earth that can provide us with an adequate definition of mind. No one knows where it comes from. No one knows how it works. It remains, in the most profoundly scientific sense, a mystery. Only in the last few decades has it even come to occupy the attention of modern researchers. The discipline of cognitive science, driven in large part by the development of artificial intelligence, only dates back to the latter half of the 20th century. I am not in possession of the thing which I just said nobody possesses. I can't tell you. I use the word mind and all of those other terms like they're loaded bombs waiting to go off. Because lo and behold, maybe someday someone will understand what a mind is. But somehow, without knowing what it is exactly that we're talking about, we can, I don't know, safely or unsafely presume that whatever a mind is, we've all got them, and we use them. And it's clearly been among the basic challenges facing humans for a long time, how to use them. What do you think? And, you know, one of the things I recognized many years ago is that's what we've got in the text we call Lao Tzu. We've got a manual that answers up to what is the mind and how do you use it. At least the way those questions or such questions were approached over 2,000 years ago. In the same community of knowledge out of which emerge the basic medical texts. You know, the Lao Tzu historically is older than the Suen. So, in very broad strokes, one can understand the Suen as the product of intellectuals for whom texts such as Lao Tzu were definitely common knowledge. Do you guys read Lao Tzu?
The Tao Te Ching does that count?
Yeah.
Oh, actually, I meant the I Ching commentary. Does that count?
I don't know what the I Ching commentary is.
Lao Tzu has commentary on.
I think thinking of Confucian. I think a lot of that from in the Wilhelm's translation of I Ching, like they have like the kind of commentaries, like the Great Learning and stuff like that. I think a lot of it was attributed to Confucius from the book. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, I'm speaking specifically about that text called Tao Te Ching. It's alternately known as the Lao Tzu. Anyway, if you're not already familiar with the text, I highly recommend that you pick it up.
Do you have a recommended translation?
This is the second most translated text in human history. There's probably 1,500 English language versions. Many of them provide interesting insights into the meaning of the text. I can testify that, when I was 12 years old, I bought my first copy of Lao Tzu, the translation by D.C. Lau. I still think D.C. Lau's translation is a good one. But I've been studying the text for more than 50 years. When I lived in Beijing, I had a job that permitted me lots of free time. And I was studying calligraphy. And what I would do is go to my favorite tea house and practice writing Lao Tzu. I thought, I have to practice my handwriting. I might as well write something that's interesting to me. So I wrote, really it was probably the first 15 chapters, thousands of times, in order to learn the characters. Lo and behold, as I studied the Chinese text, I had a whole new understanding of what the text was and what it meant and what the individual terms meant. So what I recommend is getting a bilingual translation and really learning the Chinese characters. I've always found that classical Chinese is easier to approach than modern Chinese. But that may be very personal to me. I don't know if it's accurate for other folks. But the Lao Tzu should be, like I was suggesting earlier, a companion. And if you're going to spend a lot of time with it, learn the text. You will appreciate it. There's a book called My Words Are Very Easy to Understand,
That's the one I have.
which is the Lao Tzu text, the text of comments on it by Ching, who was a Taiji teacher. And it's all in Chinese and it's all in English. There are some problems in the translation, but overall it's quite good. And Professor Cheng's comments are quite valuable.
I can have a question kind of with the question, like what is the mind and how do you use it? And then using, like going to the Tao Te Ching to kind of get at the answer. How do you keep your, because like you kind of mentioned, it's a bomb that you're kind of, because there's such a loaded word, the mind. How do you take that bomb and try to look at, how do you keep the concepts that you already have from, shaping what you're reading, or how do you step out of that? How do you avoid the explosion, maybe?
Or you don't. All of us are our habits. We are who we are. If there's a benefit to even becoming self-aware in this way, to me, it's that it puts information into clearer or deeper relief. Like a painting that now is not only two-dimensional, but three-dimensional. It helps us to recognize, if nothing else initially, there's more going on here than meets the eye. And in the end, in the Taiji class and working in clinical training, working in the clinic, the currency of our interaction is our attention. All we can do in the final analysis is pay closer attention. And it does that. I believe that anybody who looks will see that, yes, they are the product of their earlier training and cultural indoctrination and so on. And no, you can't just unbe yourself. You can't undo those forces, or can you? This is, to me, it's tantamount to the problem that we face as Taiji students. Can we resolve long-standing tension that we hold in our flesh? Can we relax? I challenge the Taiji students all the time in this way. It's great to have it as a precept to relax the body and the mind completely. But what do you do? How do you go about doing that? The note that I wanted to sound clearly was that in the pursuit of knowledge, what we are advised to do by Lao Tzu in the Tao Te Ching is to proceed towards knowledge recognizing that knowing by way of not knowing is best. And this conforms with a broader mandate that one encounters in Lao Tzu under the rubric Wu Wei, non-action. The Taoist ideal was accomplishing with non-action. Wei Wu Wei.
Is it the same character way for both?
Yeah. Wei in classical language means to be or to act. It can also be to call. Wu is negation.
Oh, these characters look nice together.
Yeah, let's take a short break
Do you need
to drink in peace.
Well, I was thinking when you first started talking about medicine and intention, and when does it matter what the practitioner is thinking? The one thought that came to my mind was something you always say in Taiji is first it's in the mind, then it's in the body. Is that from Lao Tzu? No. Is that just a Taiji thing, or is that just a Ken thing? Something you say a lot. And I was thinking it must relate to the clinic too. And maybe in that way of like that intention.
Part of my ambition is to document, encourage, support, and otherwise facilitate the application of the principles of Taiji to the practice of clinical medicine. So, someone asked Professor Cheng once, how do you know if you're practicing the right way? And his answer was, read the classics. If what you're doing conforms to what you read in the classics, then you can feel confident that you're practicing the right way. Speaking to the ways in which Chinese medicine and the knowledge found in Chinese medicine differs from modern biomedical knowledge. And this is pointed out in Elizabeth Shu's review of Don Harper's translation of the Moangdre medical text. In a little essay called utility in the body.
I read that.
Yeah. So she points out that modern anatomical knowledge of the body was obtained and developed by visual examination of dead bodies. Anatomical and physiological knowledge in China 2,000 years ago or more was developed in contrast by tactile examination of living bodies. Here is another important reminder that understanding the provenance of knowledge can be key to understanding the meaning of that knowledge. And why is that particularly important to us? One of the presumptions of this approach to basic education is that the basic ideas and theories related to Chinese medicine are most effectively studied and understood through touch, not through language, not through diagrams, but through physical, tactile input. You want to know what a point is? Touch 10,000. And then don't ask me, tell me.